There's a powerful truth about human behavior that most people never understand, and because they don't understand it, they spend their lives chasing love, begging for attention, trying to force connection with someone who keeps pulling away. But here's the paradox of attraction. The harder you chase an avoidant person, the faster they run. Why? Because avoidance is not about you. It's about their fear of losing freedom, control, or emotional safety. And when someone feels pressure, their brain goes into protection mode. They distance themselves not because they don't care, but because their nervous system tells them distance equals safety. Now here's where most people make the fatal mistake. They panic. They text more, they explain more, they try harder. And every one of those actions sends a silent message. My happiness depends on you. And the moment someone feels responsible for your emotional survival, attraction collapses. So what is the real secret? The secret is energetic reversal. Instead of trying to control their behavior, you master your own energy. Because in every relationship, there is always one person who is emotionally leading. The leader is the one who is centered, grounded, and fulfilled within themselves. And when you step into that energy, something extraordinary happens. Pressure disappears. Mystery returns. Respect grows. Avoidant people are not drawn to neediness, but they are deeply drawn to emotional strength and independence. When you stop chasing, you create space. And space is powerful. Space allows curiosity to grow. Space allows someone to feel your absence. Space allows them to ask the question they never ask when you are always available. What if I lose this person? You see, people do not chase what they already feel they fully possess. They chase what feels valuable, what feels rare, what feels slightly out of reach. But this is not about manipulation. This is about self-respect. When you build a life filled with purpose, growth, and passion, something magnetic begins to happen. Your energy changes, your posture changes, the way you speak changes. You're no longer trying to be chosen. You become someone who chooses. And that energy is incredibly disarming to someone who is avoidant because they expect pressure, they expect emotional demands, they expect drama. But when they encounter calm confidence, emotional freedom, and a person who is fully alive in their own purpose, their defenses soften. They start leaning closer, not because you forced them, but because your presence feels safe, inspiring, and rare. Here is the deeper principle. Human beings move toward pleasure and away from pain. Pressure feels like pain to an avoidant mind, but peace, strength, and emotional independence feel like freedom, and freedom is irresistible. So instead of asking yourself, how do I make them chase me? Ask a better question. How do I become the kind of person whose life is so powerful, so joyful, and so purposeful that people naturally want to be part of it? Because the most attractive quality in the world is not beauty, it is not perfection. It is inner certainty. When you know who you are, when your happiness does not depend on another person, when your life is driven by purpose rather than validation, you become magnetic. And suddenly the dynamic changes. The person who once pulled away begins leaning in. The person who needed space starts creating connection. The person who was distant becomes curious. Why? Because they feel something different around you. No pressure, no desperation, just strength, peace, and presence. And that kind of energy does something extraordinary. It disarms fear. It awakens attraction. And it reminds them that being close to you doesn't mean losing freedom. It means gaining something far more powerful. A connection built not on need, but on choice. Let's dive deeply into the first key point. Stop chasing, start centering. This is not just a strategy. It's a mindset shift that transforms how you show up in every interaction, especially with someone who is avoidant. Most people don't realize how much chasing comes from a place of internal lack. We think if we try harder, text more, call more, or explain more, we'll somehow earn their love or attention, but chasing is the opposite of attraction. It communicates a scarcity mentality. I need you to be happy. I need you to validate me. I need you to stay. And that very neediness triggers avoidance instinctively because it feels suffocating. Centering, on the other hand, flips the script. It's about returning to your own power, your own life, and your own emotional stability. When you are centered, you are fully grounded in yourself. You no longer allow someone else's emotional rhythm to dictate your mood, your decisions, or your sense of worth. Centering requires self-awareness, noticing when you are reacting from fear, insecurity, or the compulsion to fill an empty space inside. You pause, breathe, and recognize that your value is inherent. It doesn't come from another person's approval or attention. When you center yourself, you create a new type of energy. Instead of the frantic, grasping energy of chasing, you radiate calm confidence. This energy is magnetic because it signals emotional safety and independence. People, including those with avoidant tendencies, are drawn to emotional stability because it is rare. Most relationships are full of emotional storms, subtle pressures, and unspoken expectations. But a centered person is like a quiet lighthouse in the chaos. They do not chase. They do not demand. They simply exist in their power, fully alive and grounded. Centering is also about presence. It's not just a mental shift, it's an energetic one. When you center yourself, you become fully present in your own life rather than projecting anxiety or longing onto someone else. You engage with them from a place of strength, not neediness. You listen deeply, speak calmly, and move with intention. Your centered state communicates without words that you are complete and whole on your own. This is profoundly disarming to an avoidant individual because it removes the dynamic of pressure and dependence. Finally, centering is transformative because it allows you to reclaim your time, focus, and energy. Instead of spending countless hours trying to earn attention or manipulate connection, you invest in growth, passion, and purpose. You do not disappear or play games. You simply live a life so rich and compelling that your presence becomes naturally magnetic. In this state, you are not trying to control them. You are controlling your own energy, your own emotions, and your own destiny. Chasing is replaced by freedom, and freedom is irresistible. Emotional self-mastery is one of the most powerful tools you can cultivate when dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies. Most people believe that relationships are about doing more, saying more, or proving more, but the truth is, the way you manage your own inner world is far more impactful than any external effort. Emotional self-mastery begins with awareness. It's the ability to notice your feelings without being controlled by them, to see the impulse to react from fear, insecurity, or frustration, and instead choose a response that aligns with your highest self. This is not about suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. It's about understanding them, owning them, and channeling them in a way that strengthens your presence rather than destabilizes it. When someone is avoidant, they are highly sensitive to emotional intensity. They instinctively pull away from pressure, neediness, or anything that threatens their sense of autonomy. If you react impulsively, texting too much, showing anger, or begging for connection, you're feeding exactly the pattern that keeps them distant. Emotional self-mastery allows you to break this cycle. By maintaining calm and steady energy, you demonstrate that your happiness is not dependent on their immediate attention or approval. This steadiness communicates security, which is one of the most magnetic qualities a person can possess. Self-mastery also requires discipline in thought and action. It's about recognizing when your mind wants to spiral into assumptions, fears, or stories about what they should be doing. Instead of allowing your thoughts to dictate your emotions, you intentionally redirect your focus toward what empowers you. You may feel anxiety or longing, but you acknowledge it without acting on it impulsively. By choosing responses rooted in clarity rather than fear, you create a sense of reliability and emotional safety that draws avoidant individuals closer. Another key aspect of emotional self-mastery is consistency. Avoidant personalities often test boundaries and emotional stability, consciously or unconsciously. If your emotional state fluctuates with their behavior, it creates unpredictability, which reinforces their need to pull away. But when you maintain a steady, grounded presence, you become a safe harbor. They may initially resist or test you, but over time, the consistent energy of someone who masters their own emotions is profoundly attractive. It communicates strength without aggression, presence without suffocation, and depth without dependency. Emotional self-mastery also transforms your interactions into opportunities for connection rather than conflict. When you respond rather than react, you shift the dynamic from chaos to harmony. You're no longer chasing approval or trying to fix their avoidance. Instead, you embody a calm certainty that encourages them to meet you in that space. This creates an invisible magnetism where curiosity, respect, and attraction naturally arise. In mastering your own emotions, you not only disarm avoidant tendencies, you elevate the entire quality of your relationships. It becomes less about control or persuasion, and more about presence, authenticity, and the quiet power of emotional strength. Ultimately, emotional self-mastery is a declaration of your independence and your worth. It signals that while you value connection, your peace and fulfillment are non-negotiable. And it is this combination, steadiness, clarity, and grounded confidence, that awakens attraction, disarms avoidance, and transforms relationships into spaces of mutual respect and genuine desire. Creating space instead of pressure is one of the most misunderstood yet profoundly effective principles when interacting with someone who has avoidant tendencies. Most people believe that if they want someone to care, they must fill every moment with attention, messages, and reassurances. But avoidance is not about lack of interest. It is about fear of emotional suffocation. When you crowd an avoidant person with constant presence, expectations, or urgency, their nervous system perceives it as a threat. Pressure triggers their instinct to withdraw, leaving both parties frustrated and disconnected. The key is understanding that space is not distance from love. It is the fertile ground in which attraction grows. Giving space is an act of emotional intelligence. Giving space is an act of emotional intelligence. It requires you to step back, pause, and resist the impulse to control outcomes. Instead of reacting to every text, call, or perceived sign of withdrawal, you choose calm observance. You maintain your own rhythm and focus on your life, your goals, and your joy. This creates an invisible signal to the avoidant person that you are whole, centered, and self-sufficient. The absence of pressure paradoxically sparks interest because humans are naturally drawn to what is free, unattached, and mysterious. When you stop crowding, you stop chasing, and in stopping, you begin to magnetically invite connection rather than forcing it. Space also communicates trust. By not micromanaging their emotions or decisions, you show that you respect their autonomy. Avoidant individuals often struggle with fear of engulfment or loss of independence. And when they sense someone is willing to meet them without coercion, it lowers their defenses. The dynamic shifts from conflict to curiosity. They begin to lean into the relationship on their own terms, exploring connection at a pace that feels safe. Pressure may temporarily elicit compliance, but it never fosters true desire. Freedom, however, awakens voluntary engagement and authentic emotional investment. Creating space requires disciplined restraint. It is not about ignoring someone or playing manipulative games. It is about maintaining your boundaries and living your life fully. You cultivate interests, friendships, and passions that make your life rich and compelling. You show up in the relationship as a complete person, not a shadow-seeking validation. This energetic independence is what draws avoidant personalities closer because it removes the tension of obligation and replaces it with the invitation of choice. They are free to come closer or step back, and paradoxically, the freedom often drives them toward the connection you desire. Another layer of creating space is emotional neutrality. Avoidant individuals are highly sensitive to reactions that convey panic, jealousy, or neediness. When you practice emotional neutrality, you respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. You don't escalate situations or create unnecessary drama. Your calm presence allows the other person to feel safe, respected, and understood without feeling trapped. Over time, this generates trust and fosters a bond rooted in authentic curiosity and mutual respect rather than fear or pressure. Ultimately, creating space is a demonstration of inner strength. It is a signal that your happiness does not depend on someone else's behavior, yet you remain open to connection. By stepping back, you step into your power, And this shift in energy transforms the dynamic entirely. Avoidant tendencies, once resistant and distant, begin to soften because the very thing they were running from, pressure, is replaced by freedom, safety, and the allure of choice. In mastering the art of space, you create a magnetic presence that naturally draws them in, inviting connection rather than demanding it, and allowing genuine desire to flourish. Becoming magnetic through purpose is one of the most powerful yet often overlooked ways to influence attraction, especially when dealing with someone who tends to be avoidant. Most people approach relationships from a place of lack. They think, if I just give more, show more, or be more for them, they will want me. But chasing from a place of scarcity never creates lasting attraction. True magnetism comes from living a life filled with meaning, passion, and direction, because people are drawn to energy, not neediness. Purpose ignites confidence, and confidence is magnetic. When you live with intention, you are no longer defined by someone else's attention. You are defined by your own vision, your own goals, and your own life's mission. Avoidant individuals are especially sensitive to emotional neediness and pressure. When someone is constantly seeking approval, their nervous system senses entanglement and moves toward distance. But when a person demonstrates a clear sense of purpose, a life that is vibrant and fully lived, something shifts in the dynamic. Purpose communicates that your happiness and fulfillment are self-generated. You are not contingent on their validation. And that sense of self-sufficiency is inherently attractive because it removes the weight of obligation and replaces it with intrigue and respect. Living with purpose also creates natural boundaries. Someone who is invested in their passions and goals does not have time to overinvest in drama, manipulation, or constant reassurance. This creates a subtle energy of scarcity, not in a manipulative way, but as a reflection of genuine value. People, including avoidant personalities, are drawn to what is rare, alive, and fully expressed. Purposeful living cultivates depth, which is magnetic because it resonates with the unconscious desire in others to experience someone who is fully present in their own life. Purpose fuels emotional strength. When your life is filled with meaning, you are less reactive to fluctuations in someone else's attention. You no longer feel abandoned or rejected if they pull away temporarily. Instead, you respond from clarity and calm confidence, knowing that your fulfillment comes from within. Avoidant individuals sense this stability and are naturally drawn toward it because it signals safety, independence, and emotional resilience. The more grounded and purposeful you become, the more they feel the magnetic pull of your presence. Another element of purpose-driven magnetism is passion. Purpose is not just about tasks or goals. It's about living with energy, excitement, and vision. When you pursue your life with enthusiasm, it radiates outward. People, particularly avoidant types, are drawn to energy that feels alive rather than energy that feels needy. Your engagement with the world becomes contagious, sparking curiosity, admiration, and desire. You are not trying to control their emotions or decisions. You are simply being fully alive, and that presence naturally attracts. Ultimately, magnetism through purpose transforms relationships from dependence into choice. You are no longer chasing attention or affection because your energy is rooted in self-fulfillment. Avoidant tendencies are softened not through pressure, manipulation, or emotional pleading, but through the quiet, radiant power of someone who is fully alive in their own mission. When your life is rich, meaningful, and purposeful, people, including those who instinctively pull away, cannot help but be drawn to your energy, intrigued by your presence, and inspired to engage on a deeper level. Purpose is the ultimate attractor because it is authentic, confident, and unstoppable. Responding rather than reacting is one of the most transformative practices you can develop, particularly when engaging with someone who has avoidant tendencies. Most people operate on autopilot, letting emotions dictate their words, actions, and decisions. When an avoidant person pulls back, the instinct is often to panic, argue, beg, or attempt to control the situation. These reactive behaviors create tension, reinforce distance, and escalate the exact fear the avoidant person is trying to manage. Responding, in contrast, is a conscious choice. It is the ability to observe your emotions, understand the situation, and act from a place of clarity and purpose rather than fear or compulsion. This subtle shift in energy can completely transform relational dynamics. At its core, responding requires emotional self-awareness. You must recognize the surge of anxiety, frustration, or longing that arises when someone distances themselves. Instead of letting those emotions drive immediate action, you pause, you breathe. You remind yourself that their avoidance is not a reflection of your worth, but a projection of their internal need for space and autonomy. By creating this pause between stimulus and reaction, you reclaim your power. You are no longer at the mercy of another person's behavior. Instead, you act intentionally, shaping the interaction rather than being shaped by it. Responding also communicates strength and stability. Avoidant individuals are drawn to energy that is calm, grounded, and predictable because it signals safety. When you react impulsively, sending multiple messages, showing anger, or expressing desperation, you feed the energy of unpredictability and pressure, which reinforces their instinct to withdraw. When you respond thoughtfully and with composure, you model the emotional stability they may not yet have developed. This does not mean being cold or detached. It means maintaining your inner balance while engaging with respect and clarity. Another key aspect of responding is clarity of intention. When you respond, every word and action is deliberate. You do not over-explain, justify, or manipulate. You communicate from a place of integrity. You set boundaries calmly, express your feelings without demand, and act in alignment with your values. This clarity allows the avoidant person to encounter you without feeling trapped or coerced. It shifts the energy from tension to curiosity, from pressure to freedom, and from fear to attraction. Responding rather than reacting also strengthens your presence and self-respect. It allows you to maintain your identity, your life, and your emotional sovereignty, regardless of how the other person behaves. Avoidant tendencies often emerge in relationships with people who give too much power to external circumstances or external validation. By responding with composure, you demonstrate that your emotional life is self-generated and that your fulfillment does not depend on anyone else. This independence is magnetic because it signals authenticity, reliability, and inner strength, qualities that draw people toward you rather than push them away. Ultimately, responding is a practice of empowerment. It transforms the dynamic from chaos to equilibrium, from pursuit to attraction. By responding rather than reacting, you create an environment where the avoidant person can feel safe, respected, and intrigued, allowing connection to grow naturally. It is a skill that turns emotional intelligence into an invisible force of magnetism, creating bonds rooted in trust, curiosity, and genuine desire, rather than fear, pressure, or neediness. Valuing yourself first is the cornerstone of any magnetic and healthy relationship, especially when dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies. Many people fall into the trap of measuring their worth by how much attention or approval they receive from others. They bend, compromise, and sacrifice their own needs in an attempt to keep someone close, believing that their happiness depends on the other person. But the attraction does not grow from desperation. It grows from confidence, self-respect, and the quiet power of someone who knows their value. When you truly value yourself, your actions, decisions, and energy are guided by your own standards, not by the fleeting moods or behaviors of someone else. Avoidant individuals are acutely sensitive to neediness or dependence. When they sense that someone's happiness is contingent on their approval, their instinct is to pull away. But when you prioritize your own worth, you communicate a subtle yet powerful message. You are whole on your own, and your life is complete with or without their presence. This creates freedom for both parties. They no longer feel trapped or pressured, and you no longer feel diminished or anxious. Valuing yourself first also reshapes boundaries. You naturally say no to what doesn't serve you, and yes to what aligns with your growth and purpose. This firmness and clarity make you magnetic because it demonstrates integrity and self-respect. It signals to an avoidant person that your time, energy, and attention are precious. This isn't about arrogance. It's about honoring your own life and emotional well-being. When you embody this energy, you shift from chasing to being chosen. Others, including those who are avoidant, are drawn to the person who respects themselves because that respect creates safety, curiosity, and genuine desire. In essence, value in yourself first transforms the dynamic from need to power, from dependence to attraction. It is the invisible force that awakens interest, disarms fear, and inspires pursuit, not through manipulation, but through the undeniable magnetism of authentic self-worth. Thank you for trusting me with your time and curiosity. Wishing you endless inspiration and clarity on your journey. Goodbye for now. May your path be filled with purpose, growth, and magnetic engine. RG.